All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. I've got another great interview with Geoffrey. Um, you are the Siege of the Core champion. What is your sorcery story, or like, how did you start playing, and then we can go moving into the deck.
Yeah, so pretty new to sorcery. I started this year, pretty early this year, January, February. Coming from Magic, I think that's not too much of a surprise.
That's pretty common, right?
Um, yeah, exactly. Quickly joined the league, I think in season four. Did a couple of it paper tournaments. There was one in Paris, where I'm from, in June. Um, Season five of the league, went to the finals. And then I went to Essen for Spiel and the release of Arthurian Legends.
Very
This
nice.
was mostly limited, but I also did pretty well. I took down both events there. Um, and yeah, now it was Sorcerer at the Core, an event in Belgium, constructed, which I was quite excited to see post AL. And yeah, went well. Took down the finals with an Archimago deck that we can talk about.
Yeah, no, Archimago is definitely the one that's come out of not like out of nowhere. Like Druid was like the first one was like, oh, this is busted. You get a free 4/4 kind of thing. But the Death
Yeah.
Speaker for spells archetype is very, very strong. Yeah, what do you want? Where do you want to start in this?
Yeah, I was testing three decks, mostly for sorcerers at the core, and then the league. Um so Archimago was one of them. Sorcerer Airfire, so the
Mm-hmm.
more aggressive burn version with a lot of charge minions. And then Fury Road, classic old Fury Road. I
Yeah,
think the two best decks are probably Sorcerer Airfire and Archie at this time. Um my hot take is I think Druid will get there. I think Druid will be the best deck in a couple months. I
yeah.
haven't I have not seen an optimal list, I think, so far, but the
People are
potential
still
is
working
there.
on it for sure. Yeah, Druid is it's a
Yeah.
little more. It takes a little more to figure out why it's so good. But yeah,
Yeah. Also, like, Archimago tells you what it wants to do. There's not 1,000 ways to go about it. You could change 5 to 10 cards between lists,
hmm
but Druid is so wide open. Could be any element, could be any types of decks. So I
yeah,
think I think the community will get there.
I agree.
Um so yeah, I eventually decided for to go for Archimago for the Belgium event. I still think it's up there with Sorcerer Airfire, but we knew two things going into the event. The first one is that it was going to be open deck list,
hmm
which makes Feast for Crows a lot more appealing. And the second one is that the finals were going to be best of three. And I think sideboarding with Archimago, the ceiling is a lot higher than than for Sorcerer Airfire, mostly because you run a very deep common sense package, which makes the impact of even one of cards in your sideboard a lot more tangible. Like, you're gonna see your sideboard cards if you want to.
Yeah, if you board in a border militia, you have enough common senses to go get it eventually.
Exactly. So like you're as long as you're willing to go ordinary cards in your sideboard impact is multiplied because you run four common senses.
Very cool. Yeah, that's
Um,
I didn't thought about that just because I had only I've played in a best of three constructed tournament before, but that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, it was new for me as well. I really loved it. I get why it's hard to do for sorcery because like literally the finals took 2 hours.
Yeah, it was a long
Um,
time.
yeah, especially given the matchup.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was a lot of fun and definitely a new exercise. Um, and so
yeah.
yeah, when it comes to the list, um, I think it's pretty close to a stock list for Archimago if such a thing exists. Um,
The
Earth
air,
and Air is definitely the
yeah,
base.
air fire or air earth. Archimago seems to be like the quote unquote best version, but with a splash of fire is
Yeah, so the way I see it, Earth and Air, very hard to avoid. You love blinks, you love common sense. You're
blink.
incentivized to go deep into these colors
Blink
because you want divine
is
healings.
yeah, Blink is so like such a linchpin. Like you get a card from it, and you get a third a card. Like it's so useful. I was very impressed on like playing Mission Magoo with Blinks and like drawing sights with it, and like this just feels strong.
Yeah. Common Sense is essentially the same story.
Hmm.
You can't get a side, but like you can prepare for what you expect to be an issue.
Yeah.
And once you have a foot in air and earth, you might as well go deep and get like the Divine Healings, the
Hmm.
Arcane Barrage, the Browse, right? Like, so the Merlin, of course. So I feel like these two are staples. And then the question is, do you splash for a third color? Do you go deep in a third color? Or do you go all the way to 4 colors?
Makes sense.
And the trade-off is on your side, right? If you stay two color and a splash, you can run a pretty good suite of utility sites, especially against aggro decks.
Hmm.
And the more you go into the other 2 colors, you have to kind of dilute your sites or even scrap those utility sites completely.
Yeah, like the
Which
only
I was not ready to do. Yeah.
I would say the only utility site you have here is like Wizard's Den, that's off color, and then I mean you got the Pillar, which is a utility site, but it's also Threshold. Like,
Yeah, so I'd describe utility site as almost anything that doesn't give you more than one threshold in
hmm.
this deck. So I kind of count the Pebbled Path almost as a utility site, even though it does advance my Earth thresholds.
Okay,
The bridges, the Perilous Bridge,
like
Gnome
you're
Hollows,
playing you're
part of
playing
my Earth.
Pebbles, Gnomes, and Bridges for the effect, right? Not for the Threshold.
Well, the fact that it's the right color makes it easier,
Yeah,
but if you wanted to go like deeper into a third color or 4 colors, these are the ones that you need to sacrifice in order to hit your other thresholds.
oh, okay. Okay. I
And that's the sacrifice I wasn't really willing to make.
Yeah, to speak on that a little bit more, this is pretty similar to a replicate list that we that's been running around by a CJ. So that was
Yeah,
like your concern about it was the like there's not enough utility sites in that kind of list where you need to splash for the water.
exactly. You might look at the spells list and be like, oh yeah, very, very similar list.
Hmm.
And that's true because I think maybe 5, 6 spells are different. But as soon as you look at the site, you realize, oh yeah, that plays very differently.
Yeah, with the
Um,
I know we've had a lot of conversations about like, well, is Pebbles Path better or Gnome's Hollow's better? It's like well, you probably
yeah,
want both.
exactly. And I think it's a bit of a meta call.
Hmm.
If you expect a lot of Archimagos and to play the mirror match quite a lot, maybe you're incentivized to go more the 3 or 4 color routes because you're not gonna miss your Pebble Path. You're not gonna miss your Gnome Hollows.
Yeah,
And if you expect the field to be mostly sorcerers, I think you might be better off narrowing down your list to 2 colors and a splash because you can afford these sites again.
interesting. Okay, and then
And so
yeah, go
I
ahead.
I actually so like the season 6 top cut league is going on right now. I actually went with a greedier Archimago list for that because I thought the meta would be more Archimago. Whereas for sorcerer at the core, I thought there would be a lot. I think a lot of the field was expected to be sorcerer, and so I brought it back to a safer quote unquote
Oh,
version.
so that was just a pure meta call on your part of like there's probably going to
I
be
think so.
more sorcerers. Okay, and then you get into like the TTS league, which is probably I would say the highest level competitive sorcery events you can go to, other than like Gen Con or some other large events. And a lot of people are probably going to be playing Archie and like that really high power stuff, and I found that a lot of charge decks are really good, but sometimes they just don't do enough and control is so strong right now where if you get a Pebbles path, it just shuts down their entire game plan, and then you can just deal with their minions pretty effectively.
Exactly. I think sorcerer being a pretty easy enter deck. Not to
Hmm.
say that there isn't a lot to master, but it performs well in the hand of a new player, I think.
Or somebody who's
It
just been
means that
playing for 6 months and just is getting their feet wet. It's like no, I mean I still play sorcerer and still play aggro decks because that's where I like to play, and I'm not a highly uh, experienced player. Like I've been playing for 2 years, but I feel like a lot of even people coming from Magic for 5 to 10 years like play differently.
yeah, I also think the set is still relatively new, and so not a lot of people have given Archimago a lot of thoughts.
Hmm.
Whereas, the sorcerer play style or play pattern is pretty well understood. So if you only have limited time going into the paper events, maybe you go back to something that's a bit more familiar.
Yeah, makes sense. And then last question here with the sideboard. I know you mentioned like a lot of it's common sense, but like on your game too, you sideboarded in guards and border militia. Did you sideboard anything else in, or a tump too? Right.
Yeah. So game two, I bring in the Crossroads, the War Militump, um, the Lightning Bolt, Magic Missile, Teleport, Border Militia, and Guards. So quite a lot
Oh
actually.
wow. Okay.
Um, yeah, there are a couple sites as we just mentioned that are not necessary in the mirror match. So yeah, spoiler: the finals was against another Archimago, but I don't necessarily need a Pebble Path. Um, or a Gnome Hollows, and so I can afford to kind of bring in Crossroads and the Tump to accelerate towards the sides that are going to have an impact in that matchup. So the things like Funeral Pyres, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine giving up a bit of threshold by playing a Crossroads if it can ensure I'm going to land a well-timed Funeral Pyre, um, or if I can get to my Wormillo Tump a bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
So the three sites in that matchup are pretty free to kind of side in. And then for these spells, Lightning Bolt, Magic Missile, Teleport, Border Militia, and Guards, they're generally here to replace things that you don't really need in the mirror match. So the Poison Nova is not very effective because they're unlikely to swarm you with a bunch of minions that you immediately want to get rid of. So that's
Mm-hmm.
an easy like 3 that you can take out.
Unless they have guards in their list.
Unless they have guards. I did double check before I did my sideboard, and Marco, the player that was in the finals with me, great player. We had a great best of 3. Um, I don't think he had any token makers in his list at all,
Mm-hmm.
so I was pretty safe to kind of remove the poison novas. Like at most, they're gonna get, you know,
Makes sense.
a spider and a Merlin maybe, but I have other ways to deal with that. I don't need a Nova on turn 5.
Makes a lot of sense. Uh, Last question here. Any key cards that you like? These are lynch, other than Blink and Common Sense. These are linchpin cards. Like if you see these, you're like really happy, at least in the mirror.
Um, yeah, in the mirror, definitely. The things that you want to see in the mirror match are things that are going to bring you card advantage, or things that are going to help fuel your graveyard a lot faster. So we're talking about Grandmaster, Merlin. That's kind of like your card advantage. Orb, to some extent, right? If you can double cast your spells, that's essentially card advantage, especially if they're draw spells.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see the blink and the common sense, just because, like you mentioned, they're basically 1 1/3 of a card when they hit your graveyard. Um, and then the thing I would like to see the most, which is very very specific to this matchup, the card is Feast for Crows. Yeah, exactly.
So what do you
Um,
name in Feast for Crows when you're in the mirror? Crater Eyes or Arcane
I think
Barrage?
it depends. It depends on your the situation at the time you play it. If
Mm-hmm.
you have enough gas in hand, maybe you're holding a Crater Eyes, maybe a combination of like a couple bolts and magic missiles and an arcane barrage. You might try and go for divine healing, and
Okay.
just basically enter the race and say, hey, I think I have enough gas to get you from 20 to 0. The only thing I don't want to see is a double divine healing of casting it normally and then recasting it from your graveyard, because that essentially neutralizes a Crater Eyes and more.
Okay.
So if you feel like you've got the advantage in terms of cards in hand and you have enough gas, I think you go for divine healing.
But if you're
Um,
like maybe card parity and you're like not really, I'm not gonna win next turn or anything. You name their win condition other than like
I
it.
think so.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you have a win and like a way to path forward, and like I need to win with this thing, you name Divine Healing so it doesn't negate your win. And then if you don't have that, you negate their win, and so you hopefully get to your win condition first.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, with Archimago, you have the added benefit of playing the first feast and then you get to see their hand.
And then
And
play it
so
again.
if you're in a position, yeah, where you can recast it immediately, maybe there's like a spell that they have two of in their hand, and that might sway your decision for the second one, right? It's
Mhm.
like, well, it's not the card I'm the most worried about, but you
But
know,
ripping two cards out of your
making
opponent's
them
hand.
discard too, yeah, it's
Yeah.
still pretty good.
Yeah.
So very powerful card, and playing it the first time doesn't feel as bad when it's an environment with open deck lists.
Oh yeah, you can't miss, right? You can always name something. All right, and then here's game one. Unfortunately, YouTube streams don't record past 12 hours, but you can find it on I think their Twitch page. So I'll leave that link into the description. But going into game one, you're looking at the mirror. What are you thinking about here?
Yeah, so it's obviously a mirror match. I do think his list is actually quite favored in the mirror match. Um, Partly for some of the things that we talked about so far. I've stayed mostly in two colors so that I could run the Pebble Path, the Perilous Bridges, the Gnome Hollows, the Quagmires. And he didn't do that. I think he went a bit deeper into fire, which I think makes him a bit more exposed to sorcerers. But that means he can play things like, I think he plays Morgana, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think he plays Major Explosion. So he has a bit more power due to having a full-on third color, which I think gives him the edge going into the finals.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was when I was doing the deck list last week. He mentioned that I mentioned that the Morgana thresholds look a little scary, and he's like, "No, it's totally fine. You have uh the fair, and you so like even paying 4 mana for a Morgana and drawing 3 is still like really above rate and still very good."
Yeah, and that's something he can afford to do just because he's not running. What did he cut? I think he cut the Pebble Path.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might have cut the Quagmires as well, so he has a lot more room to kind of bring the deep fire in.
And then
It's
go ahead.
Yeah, he also plays a Wormellotump in the main board, which I'm only bringing in the sideboard. So I think, obviously if he can hit it, then he can negate the Funeral Pyres that I'm playing main board and he's playing sideboard.
Gotcha. So turn one, or turn two, you play a blink. Do you move over at all, or do you just cycle it?
Just cycle it, really. There's
Oh.
not the reason you would want to move up, maybe, is if you're getting ready for a Poison Nova on turn 5,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't likely to be the thing I want to do in this mirror match anyway. I would do that for Sorcerer, maybe. Being able to capture 9 squares as opposed to 6 on turn 5 against an aggro deck could be the difference between winning and losing.
Gotcha.
But in this matchup, there's no reason to expose yourself to any spell that requires you to be two steps away, like a disenchant or a minor explosion.
Yeah, and then I saw you played an egg there. Watching this on stream was a little confusing because we couldn't quite see everything, and like seeing your graveyards and then having an egg off to the side or something. It was like, what's going on? But I think we got there.
Yeah. I think someone eventually came to us and said, look, can you at least put your artifacts on your avatar? Because we can't track the egg, etc., etc. So I think we eventually did that. Yeah, I think seeing the graveyards would have been helpful, especially in the mirror match. You can see kind of mine on the bottom right corner.
Yeah, I think you have a common sense and a blink in there.
That's right. But yeah, that's essentially where most of the tension lies. Is just hand size and what you have in the grave.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a pretty important moment. We're on turn 4. I play a Merlin. It's a bit aggressive because I'm unlikely to be able to use it right away. But I play it on a color out of space, so it should be pretty safe from bury effects. I play it on my head, so, Lightning Bolt would still be a 50-50. And he's not in a straight line from Magic Missile. So I actually feel decent about taking that risk, running Merlin without being able to use it right away. And you'll see in a second that was not the right choice.
Yeah, I going through the stats from this event. Oh, he I think he
That's a tithe.
yeah tithe draw 3. Uh, yeah, the infiltrates there. Infiltrate
Yeah.
was very popular in this event, like more so than it has been on TTS or any event I've been a part of. I think it's just because a lot of people got used to playing an infiltrate, and then a lot of people got used to playing watchtowers and send hounds and things to get rid of the stealth token. Do you
Yeah,
find
exactly.
do you
And
find Europe what do you call it meta to have more infiltrates, or like it's different for sure?
yeah, I think it could be a European thing. It could just be also paper events as opposed to online.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Infiltrate there was a time was really dominating in beta. And I think maybe some of the players that don't have the time to play that regularly are still kind of stuck into that. And so a lot of the sorcerer lists were playing Infiltrate, yeah,
Gotcha.
which is a decent call nowadays because, like you said, it's very it comes and goes, right? Like people are going to be prepared for it, and then they'll forget about it
Mm-hmm.
because it will have disappeared, and then they'll come back. And so this one definitely caught me off guard, even though I had actually seen his list, but at the time the final was played, I think we were like 12 hours deep into Sorcery.
Yeah, no, my brain
So
would have been fried. I don't know how you guys do it.
it was pretty rough.
So you're looking. So Archie's looking to like door somebody in like 2 turns, or do one big, I don't know, quote unquote combo control turn. What's your goal here? I guess while you're playing.
Yeah, I think that's less true in the mirror match, just because, like we said before, you can easily have like your 8 mana spell negated by a 1 mana spell, right?
Mm-hmm.
You play your Crater Rise, and if you didn't door them on that Crater Rise, they might go double Divine Healing, and you look a bit silly. Um, So this feels a lot more like a war of attrition. I'm happy to hit the Grandmaster Wizard here on 6. Um, I'd like to get my Merlin back so that I can continue to accrue card advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll manage to maneuver around Merlin and its stealth eventually. But generally, you want to hit really your key cards. So Feast is something I want to see desperately. I feel like whoever hits Feast for Crows first is in a really good position.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, I've run out of questions.
That's all right. It's going to be a pretty slow game. I think it is the slowest out of the 3 that we played. I think we're both going to see a lot of like just card advantage being accrued through the wizards, etc., etc.
I guess.
But I think, but yeah, go for it.
Oh, there's your way to get Merlin back. Very nice.
Yeah.
The root
So that's
spider.
the spider. Comes back to me. I think I free Merlin up almost immediately by, I think, recasting a blink on the spider because I really want Merlin to be on the water side.
Just to
Bury is
yeah.
almost a dead card in the matchup. It has some use for like artifacts maybe, but if you can be on a water side for your artifacts or your key minions, then maybe you leave a Bury kind of dead in their hand. So yeah.
All right. So he did attack with or move spider up on the top of there. Wasn't sure about that, but then it looks like he passed
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
So
I think the spider in this matchup they end up going for damage because they're not going to do a lot more. So his is on the surface. I
and
think it's been hitting a couple of times, but the angelic kind of
negates
offsets that.
negates
And
all that.
yeah,
And like even in this matchup where it's like 2 to 6 damage, and you're having your opponent at 14 does matter a good amount. Like that's if you're at 14 versus 20, that's you can get somebody to door from 14 a lot easier than full 20.
yeah. This was also something I wasn't necessarily considering at the time, but he plays a Fields of Kamlan.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had 3 minions on board, which is pretty unusual for my deck. But I had to sacrifice the Grandmaster and the Spider in order to keep Merlin.
And then he had firebolt. It just
Yeah.
sucks when they have all the answers, doesn't it? You could do everything
Yeah.
right, and then you just tear it all apart.
Yeah, so the angel leg is still going. I'm not too worried about life totals,
Hmm.
but this is a great use of the spider in the mirror match. Like just pressuring for 4 a turn is not nothing. It's enough to kind of chip me down from the angel leg. And eventually, when it gets to like the 13, 14, you get a bit worried. I mean, you could literally die from 13 life points in this matchup, as we've seen in game 3 that we might not get to review today.
Yeah. So, just more of a general question. In this event, were there any like games other than the finals, like you had like a really big turn, or somebody like got you to 1 and you were able to eke it back, or was there any like any moments that stood out to you?
Um, there were a couple. I think just before the top 8 cut, which so that was round 6. I needed to win because I was 4-1 at the time. Um, I was playing against, I think, Mark, who ended up 3rd in the event, and he had a really cool sorcerer water fire list.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a decent position on board, and I drew feast for crows. And I was considering, okay, what can really turn a game around for him? I feel already pretty confident. I even considered not playing the feast because I was like, well, I'd rather close the game faster. And I still ended up playing it. And so thankfully we had open deck lists, and I saw that he had an Atlantean Fate. And so I called that off the feast. And I start going through his deck, and I don't see it. And so I ask him, like, "Oh, did you change your deck list versus what you had submitted?" And it turns out that it was literally going to be the card he was going to draw next, and that's the reason it took me so long to find it. It's just
Oh
because it
no.
was at the end of the deck, and that would have absolutely crushed me. Um,
I can't tell
so
you
that
how many
was
games
yeah,
I've lost to Atlantean Fate. Yeah.
and so that was one, and then in the semifinals, I played against a Spark Mage deck, which I was surprised to see pretty deep in the tournament. And I had a pretty good opening hand. I think I kept a Divine Healing, and I ended up healing for 14. It
Hmm.
was the kind of Spark Mage decks that really want to go face.
Yep.
Like he really early teleported onto my face, and I think he went Arcane Barrage for like 4 or 5 plus Spark Mage Ping, so I was taking 8. And he did that again the following turn, and I was like, oh, this is getting dicey. And so in spite of the 2 divine healings, he put me to door right after I put him to door. So it was literally a race. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, the spark mages can really pop off, and like sometimes they don't do anything, and you don't have a teleport or something, so you can't make really burn advantage. But sometimes they can just kill you in 2 turns, and you go, "What just happened here?" And then I just saw you
Yeah,
play Scavenging Fiend. Scavenging Fiend in the mirror match feels so good because eventually they're going to hit a disenchant or get rid of your artifact, but it's like, I'll just take that back, thank you. It,
yeah.
yeah.
That's one. My favorite is kind of like build your own telekinesis, where you go disenchant on their ring and then bring it back.
Oh, okay.
Um,
That's awesome. I hadn't thought about doing it that way. It was like Scavenging Fiend is like, yeah, I just get my ring back, but you can take their ring back. Oh, that's super mean.
exactly. And in the mirror match where they also play scavenger, it's very important to do it in the same turn, so that you don't let them get the value of their scavenging fiend.
Hmm.
So there's a bit of mind game. That was not the case in the finals because I don't think he plays scavenging fiends,
I don't think so either.
but something to keep in mind. Yeah. So I think he's slowly kind of like accruing advantage. He found his own wizard. He found the princess, which is obviously gonna get a ring. Um, and he's still hitting with the spiders, which, eventually, as we talked about, now I'm down to 14. Um, Funeral Pyre was good for me. I think I took out a bit of ammunition. I don't think there was any big spell I wanted to hit on his graveyard specifically,
I
but just
think you
taking out all the small stuff is,
and
you remove ammos.
yeah, you take out the ability to cast a big thing later, right?
Exactly.
Uh, when
But
he plays Feast for Crows in this game, right? Game 1.
yeah, I think it's gonna come up soon.
Okay.
And that's really when, I can kind of feel the game slipping away from me already. but Feast is the nail in the coffin.
Do you feel like you could have done anything different in this game? That like all your decisions seem to be have well thought out, like make sense. He just had the answers. Was there anything you felt like you could have done differently, or you wish you would have done differently?
Maybe the Merlin, being able to use it right away. I eventually got it back and got, I think, maybe one spell off of it, but I should have remembered the infiltrate. I was not that in a hurry to bring him down. Apart from that, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I go for an Arcane Barrage here and try to kind of also put some pressure on him. Mostly on the off chance he's gonna finish the game with a Craterize. I want him to also be like
Lower.
low enough that yeah, it's not an easy decision, right? It's like, yeah, you can deal 10, but you might have to take 7 or 4 as well. And so you'll see Archimagos sometimes run up in their opponent's face in a mirror match to prevent the easy Craterize, if you will.
Yeah, I played when I
Can't
was.
quite
Oh god.
Yeah. I say I can't quite do that because obviously he princessed a couple turns earlier, and so I
Mm-hmm.
know he has a ring in hand. And so if I run up in his face for Craterize, I'm just gonna get pinged to death.
Yeah, when I've been testing Archie lists, oh, and Earthquake onto color out of space to turn off and bury your stuff. It's kind of mean.
Exactly. Yeah, this one is rough.
But when I've tested Archie this kind of list, and I've had played against aggressive avatars that like are now up on my site, and it's like, well, this Craterize doesn't do me a whole lot of good. I don't want to kill myself.
Yeah.
But here's the feast for crows. And
Here's the feast. Yeah.
and so
And I think he names Craterize for the first one. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So you see me taking off of my hand. Oh, you're gonna see my deck, which we've looked at already. And then I think almost immediately, or maybe the turn after, he's gonna go for Divine Healing. And I don't know if that was always the game plan or if that's a reaction to me having one in hand,
Mhm.
but it's definitely, I think, sealing the game in his favor.
Yeah, I can definitely see the second Feast for Crows naming Divine Healing. Like even if that wasn't in your hand, like just preventing your way to come back is huge.
Yeah, we see a browse as well, which means he's almost ensured to have the right tools to finish me off.
And then pinging off the ring and gaining life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's starting to go downhill.
And I know you said you regretted the Merlin, and like maybe that was the turning point of this game. But even before the Feast for Crows, you said you felt it slipping away. It in Sorcery, the games I've played, it feels like turn 5 or like mid game, you can kind of like, are you in a position to win? Are you in a position to like, is just gonna be a slow death? Like you can kind of feel that coming, which I really enjoy about Sorcery, just personally.
Yeah, and I think this deck doesn't have like a I guess like a Hail Mary button. Some decks do, right? Like you
Hmm.
could be losing to an Archimago with I don't know, a sorcerer list, and then you draw Peasant Revolt, and you go, oh, maybe I'm not out of it, right? Like maybe I'll get 3 or 4 of their sides, I'll destroy the ring or something. And this deck doesn't really have that, especially in the mirror match where, again, we talked about this, but a Craterize could easily be offset by a Divine Healing the turn after.
Gotcha. How do you feel? I guess more general questions about like Sorcery's meta currently. It's either control or aggro in my mind. There's not a whole lot of like Earth mid range play a thing pass just because there's so much efficient removal in the game.
Yeah, I think I agree with this view of the meta. I think you either go very, very like low curve, charge minions, make it very hard to kind of interact with what you're doing, or the more like the other end of the spectrum, the Archimago lists that are
Mm-hmm.
very controlly. Yeah, it's. I don't think mid range is greatly positioned at the moment, but I do think there's still stuff to be done. Like if you look at beta, right? We had what almost 2 years, 2 years worth of a beta metagame, and things were evolving constantly.
Yes.
I think we never had like the same list go like back-to-back wins in the league, for example, the Discord league. And this was something I was very impressed with when it comes to beta, and so I'm not ready to like completely write off
And
the Arthurian Legends meta just yet.
yeah, and Arthurian Legends has only been around for three months ish, and
Yeah,
it felt like every 3 to 4 months in alpha and beta, there was a meta shift. There was some kind of evolution. Some like aggro was really strong, or infiltrate was really strong, or Death Speaker was like the big boogeyman. Um, it changes, and so I'm with you. We can Sorcery is just a slower pace game. It evolves slower. It changes slower. So give it a couple more months. I think we'll see some kind of like maybe a water mid range list where it's harder to get rid of your minions or something like that. Kind of do well, but yeah, I think it's a very evolving game.
yeah, we might get into a situation where there's a bit of rock paper scissors as well. Generally, I think the charge decks can do pretty well in against Archimago because they can run Funeral Pyres at like no cost.
Mm-hmm. How do you?
Uh, Archimago gets people past, so like it's a bit of a 50-50
Or,
on who gets to their good side first.
yeah. So a question about that: how do you feel Archimago loses? Like I found that like if you can set up a big like 10 to 15 damage turn with whatever deck you're playing into it, you got to do those big alpha strike turns. You can't nickel and dime Archie to get him to 6 or something. They're just gonna heal or kill your minions. You have to like do a big turn. That's what I found that works well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes the Archie player uncomfortable. So I actually had a couple of opponents with is it Kingdom of Agartha in their deck?
Yeah.
So all minions have burrowing. So they essentially play they burrow their minions and they wait until they have a critical mass and they all go swinging at the same time. And there's not a lot that Archimago can do against that. At least my list, because I don't play River of Flame to kind of, maybe cast a Poison Nova underground or something.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen what are they called? Hydra Sprites? The one where on Genesis you name a spell, it can be played next turn.
Mm-hmm.
That naming Divine Healing can also close the game, right? Because like you might be able to swing for 10-12 and expect the Archimago player to heal back up, but naming Divine Healing at the right time could just, cut the way out of them. And then you can reswing for another 10 next turn, and then you got it. You just needed to blank their Divine Healing for one turn, and that's all it took.
Gotcha. So kind of like in the same way he named your Divine Healing to prevent you from healing. You need some way to stop them from healing their 20 life in a turn or whatever it was.
Exactly. You only need the one turn where they don't play it.
Gotcha. And then back to the game real
I think
quick.
there are tech cards.
Yeah. You played a Amulet of 19, like trying to avoid the craterized damage, right? That's the goal there.
Yeah. Well, I can't see my hand. Oh, you might actually, because for once I have my hands on the camera, but I have no cards in hand at this stage. So I think I have a ring. I draw an amulet, and I'm saying, okay, I'll play it. There's no point holding it.
Yeah, you have to play it, right? There's no.
Yeah, I have to play it, get the ring ping, maybe hope that I get him to like 10 and draw a Crater Rise or something, which doesn't happen. And so I'm top decking. I think he has still a decent amount of things in his graveyard. So yeah, I think we both know he's going to take that one.
Yeah, when one player starts top decking, the other guy has 3 or 4 cards and graveyard resources. It's just he's won the attrition game, like you said in the previously.
Yeah, exactly. So I check his graveyard. He has a ring, and so I'm gonna do the play that we talked about earlier. I think I just top decked a fiend, so I'm gonna get his ring.
Gotcha.
But that will not be enough, even with double pings, just because I'm not in a position where I can chain multiple spells in a turn. I'm top decking.
And did he have a signed foil ring?
He did, yeah. So, Séverine, the artist behind the ring, the Philosopher's Stone, etc., was at the event, and so I think he got it signed on the day, or maybe he had it from before.
That's really cool.
And so yeah, I think he attacks and then Craterize. Like he's also gonna drop a fair amount, but he doesn't care. He as soon as I'm on death's door, he
Yeah.
has spells in the graveyard. It's almost impossible.
Uh,
I
any
think I think he
any
might.
last closing comments then? Anything about the event you wanted to talk about? The event looked really cool. The stream was really good.
Yeah, the event was great. The venue was amazing. Very, very spacious. We had a whole floor just to play the games. Like as you can see in the background of our cameras, I think that the tables are like really well spaced out. You could easily walk in between all the tables, etc. And then there was a completely different floor just above, um, just to kind of like relax, eat, trade, talk to everyone, more like a casual hangout area.
Oh, cool.
And from the upper floor where you would just hang out, you could see the games being played below. There was kind of like a, I don't know, like a mezzanine, I guess.
Hmm.
So that was really cool. You know, once you finish your game, you would walk up the stairs to the upper floor, and you'd feel like you were getting out of the arena, hanging out with the other
Have a place
gladiators.
to like decompress for a minute before your next one. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was game one. We go to sideboard, which I don't know if we see
No,
in
I
the
think they cut
video,
back to
but
the announcers. But yeah, that was game one out of three. You guys played a full three, but you won the second one with the sideboard discussion we had about the deck and playing
yeah,
border militias and having a different win con than just Craterize. And then game three was a much more, what do you say, back and forth and very attrition like game, but you happened to come out on top on that one.
yeah. So game two, very quick game, surprisingly. I think he probably boarded out Poison Nova, as you would expect in the mirror match. But I boarded in Border Militia. I happened to have Orb out, and so I think I doubled Border Militia 2 turns in a row.
Hmm.
Um, and so very quickly, I think he extended the handshake. I don't think we waited for him to be on death's door. Um, and then game three, a lot more back and forth. Um, I happened to finish him from 13 life points. I went up to 10 mana. We had a bit of back and forth, earthquaking my color out of space. There was a bit of a threshold mishap as well. Somehow I was on 8 sides and didn't have any air threshold, which I
Well,
couldn't
it
clock
was
through.
the earthquake for the color out of space, which was like you had 8 sites out, and it was a little uncommon, but that earthquake kind of threw another giant wrench into threshold counts.
Yeah, I ended up earthquaking it back. He earthquaked it back, and I earthquaked it back again. I went up to 10 mana, and I went Craterized Lightning Bolt for 13. Um, so I'm not sure what he had in hand. Maybe he just didn't draw into the Divine Healing. At 13, I was fully expecting him to go back up to 20, but he didn't. So maybe he just didn't draw them.
Well, like
And
you
I
said
think, yeah,
earlier,
once you're on death's door, it's over.
yeah, like you said earlier, you just need that one turn where they don't heal, right? And that can be Hider Sprites or any number of ways, but sometimes they just don't have it.
Yeah, yeah, that happened to me in the initial 6 rounds. I lost to an Airfire Sorcerer. I think I went down to like 20 cards in deck, but just never saw the Divine Healing. So sometimes that's just how it goes.
The joys of card games. But
Exactly.
thank you so much, Joffrey, for coming in. I'll leave a link to the Discord. I'll leave a link to the Twitch VOD so people can watch the games 2 and 3. Learned a lot. Great talking to you. I'll see you around.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'll see you around.